Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this Vigilant software webinar on CyberComply and how you can future-proof your investment in compliance. Vigilant software is a developer vendor of software tools. We've been in the business of growing and developing this platform for a number of years. It's an industry-leading governance, risk management, and compliance platform, which deals with the whole host of compliance, information security, cybersecurity, and privacy challenges across the enterprise in a way that removes silos, simplifies and makes cost-effective all of those related compliance activities, and enables you to immunize yourself against the changes that come naturally and normally through in the future. I'm Alan Calder. I'm the Group Chief Executive of GRC International Group, of which IT Governance is the biggest trading brand. We have a number of companies inside the group. Vigilant Software is our main software development organization. As I said, we've been in that space for some 15 years or so. Apart from me today, you're going to be hearing from Tom Redding, who's our Business Development Manager working on strategic partnerships, and from Gary Baxter, who is our Customer Success Manager, who works to make sure that customers get out of the platform everything that we hope that they will get. We're going to talk you very, very briefly today through the cyber threat landscape. Today's cyber threat landscape, the regulations and changes that are coming. Those kind of set the scene for why the future is changeable and the kind of impacts that has on one's approach to compliance. The challenges that our current user base tell us that they need to address, and which they turn to us to ask for CyberComply to help them address, and then a look at how CyberComply can help you overcome the challenges, and an insight into the expertise and agile development and after-sales support that we bring to the party, so that overall you can get a really good feel of how CyberComply can help you embed in your organization cost-effectively a future-proofed investment in compliance. I'm going to talk first of all about the cyber threat landscape, and it's rapidly changing. We're all kind of used to seeing day in and day out now information in the news about cyber attacks, about nation states, about cyber criminals. But if you look at this at a number of key points, the threat landscape is really made up at a high level of cybercrime. All major cybercrime organizations now have serious cyber capabilities. Cybercrime is a very lucrative, very profitable business with very low risk, very low overhead. So it attracts a lot of very smart people. And of course, nation states who develop quite a lot of the most sophisticated software and work with cybercrime in the kind of gray areas that enable nation states to deny what's going on. But nation states steal intellectual property, steal money. There are rogue states like North Korea, Iran, and others which operate specifically in order to keep their states afloat. And all of that percolates down into areas that affect all organizations, because in an environment where cybercrime is increasingly rampant, all organizations tend to be at risk. The attack surface that organizations can go after is changing. The shift, particularly driven by the pandemic, of organizations to digitize and to move services into the cloud, has created a situation where more and more organizations are exposed. They've digitized, moved into the cloud extremely fast without necessarily knowing how to configure themselves securely, which means that they are much more easily exploitable. Vulnerabilities are much easier for organizations to go after. And those weaknesses and vulnerabilities, both in internet-facing hardware and software, but also particularly in the fuzzy firewall that is human beings, can be exploited and is exploited by hackers day in, day out. Inadequate governance, risk management, and compliance means that at the policy and procedure, at the human level, there is inadequate identification and management of risk, which makes the whole opportunity for cyber criminals, that much more exciting. Cybercrime damages expected to increase by 15% an annum to about $10.5 trillion by 2025, up from just $3 trillion in 2015. And governments are aware of this set of changes, so we see increasing legislation being driven around trying to make countries secure, trying to make their internet presence secure, and we see that happening in the way of privacy regulation. So in the UK and the EU GDPR, with UK GDPR looking as though it will diverge to one extent or another from EU GDPR. There is data protection legislation in the US at a state level, and different laws at federal level. There are sectoral laws. There is data protection regulation in a growing number of countries around the world, Brazil, India, and of course countries like China and Russia have their own very focused set of laws designed to protect their regimes. Not only do we see that kind of privation of privacy-related laws, but cybersecurity laws, computer misuse acts, legislation around requiring reporting of data breaches, the network information security in the UK and in the EU looking at securing critical national infrastructure, and all of those laws continuing to change and evolve with changes in government, with changes in risk, with changes in the attack surface. So staying on top of that is an ongoing challenge. If you're not, you not only have the danger of a breach, but also the problem of a potential fine because you weren't compliant with the latest iteration of the regulation. On the supply side, there are not enough cybersecurity or privacy professionals. About 2.7 million people short in cybersecurity terms is what the global workforce currently looks like. But we see that kind of challenge right the way across the market. There are fragmented suppliers. There are not enough large suppliers who are able to provide a concentrated, integrated set of services that organizations need. And that means that as a buyer of cybersecurity and privacy services, you're often faced with conflicting messages and challenges on how to put together all of the different elements in a way that enables you to genuinely build a cyber defense in depth posture for the organization. And through these slides, which we're going to make available to you over the course of the next couple of days, there's a lot of really useful data about the nature of today's cyber attacks. So cyber attacks increasingly targeting small businesses because small businesses don't have in place the kind of resources they need to defend themselves. SMEs, remember, go up to 250 employees, so relatively speaking, can be organizations with market capitalizations of several hundred million, aren't equipped to recover from a cyber attack. The number of cyber attack businesses which go out of business within 6 months is very, very high. There are 3.1 billion spoofed emails sent every day. Scam messages cost businesses something like 23 billion since 2016. Organizations spend about 3.4 million responding on average to cyber attacks. So the cost of dealing with, of being targeted by cyber attacks is huge, and it's going up. It's not going to get any less, particularly with the reality of remote working, with more and more organizations having to accept, like it or not, that their workforces are going to be working from home to one extent or another. So the challenge for organizations is severe. Phishing is a major route of attack. 36% of attacks use phishing. Criminals get about $4.5 million in Bitcoin through ransomware extraction. That's again on average. 82% of organizations have increased their cybersecurity budget. Increasing your cybersecurity budget is a good thing to do, but you need to be able to stay on top of everything you're investing in cybersecurity, because if you have an investment going into make sure you're complying with a particular set of regulations and dealing with a particular set of risks, and they change, you then suddenly got a vulnerability. And so being able to stay on top of that is critical. Tiny percentage of organizations have adequate cyber insurance, and cyber insurers are putting up the cost of insurance dramatically, and there are fewer and fewer of them because of the costs. And that means that increasingly organizations simply have to go down the route of covering themselves and making sure they're generally secure. Because while cyber insurance is a mitigation, if you have a breach, you can draw down, it can help you recover. You're still going to have your reputation trashed. You're still going to lose customers. You're still going to have to spend money on building out a proper cybersecurity defense in-depth framework. And critical national infrastructure is an obvious target for cyber criminals, and particularly for nation states. So healthcare, lots of vulnerable data, lots of data of vulnerable people there. In the energy sector, particularly with the Russian control of oil. Oil and gas means that there is a lot more vulnerability around energy than there was even a year ago. And attacks like that on the Colonial Pipeline, which took place in May last year, would have an even more dramatic impact this year because of the worries that organizations currently have about whether they'll have enough fuel to get through winter, the inflationary attack. The inflationary impact of fuel and oil shortages, of course, could be made much worse by successful attacks that take out significant oil and gas capabilities. A lot of the challenges come down to human error. And by human error, I'm not just talking about the error of I clicked, I hit I've got fat fingers, so I hit a number or key that I shouldn't have. I talk about human error, which means that you think you know what a phishing email looks like, but you get taken in, so you click on a link inside an email, which leads to the download of some malware and a successful attack. Data breaches that involve human error, where you've made a mistake, you need to own up to it, you need to get hold of the internal incident response team and say, I made a mistake. Often people don't, which means that because they're embarrassed or they think they'll be in trouble, which means the attack has a chance to get established. The attackers have time inside the network. They're able to build out the scale of the attack, take out more data. But on average, cyber attacks take about 238 days to identify, 79 days to resolve. Phishing takes about 213 days to identify. And hey, cutting that in half doesn't really make it a hell of a lot better. You need to be so on top of all of those areas. The cost of human error is huge for organizations. So you've got to think about cyber defense and building cyber defense in depth. The key warning from the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK is, we're in this for the long haul. Organizations support their staff through a demanding period of heightened cyber threat. You need to give them processes and equipment that enables them to manage exposures both to cyber threat and to compliance in a way that enables them to stay on top of what's going on. And one of the logical reasons for doing this through a platform is that if you lose a member of staff, either because they leave or they have COVID, you have everything in a format that enables you to continue managing it effectively. You're not dependent on a spreadsheet on one individual's workstation. Let me just talk to you briefly against that background about upcoming changes in regulation. You can see in this timeline, which I just put up, the changes that have taken place just over the last couple of years in terms of privacy, primarily privacy, but also the impact of privacy on cybersecurity. Remember that privacy and cybersecurity are two sides of exactly the same coin. If you have a cybersecurity breach, it will usually compromise personal data. If personal data is compromised, you've probably had a cybersecurity breach because you don't have appropriate technical and organizational measures in place to protect it. So you can look at that slide that I've got on screen and go, well, there is a lot changing. How on earth does one stay on top of these kinds of changes? In the UK alone, the UK government, and while we don't know what the UK government will actually look like in detail come the end of summer, nevertheless, the government just, as we're putting these slides together, published its proposed data protection bill. It's got a number of proposed changes in it, which in theory will not compromise the EU adequacy finding, but nevertheless, they're changes that organizations are going to have to accommodate. The Network Information Security Directive, there is a European version, and there's some proposed amendments coming through the UK Parliament to the version that was adopted into UK law. But those each have their impacts on how organizations, particularly in the critical national infrastructure and in the UK and the managed service provider world, go about demonstrating their compliance with cybersecurity and privacy requirement updates. And that standard that so many organizations rely on, ISO 27001 itself, is going through a series of upgrades. There will be a new version published probably in October of this year. While it itself will not bring radical changes to the standard, the changes are minor, so transition is going to be relatively straightforward. There will be a lot of changes in the control set. The ISO 27001 2022 Annex A will reflect ISO 27002 2022, and that's a very substantially reorganized set of controls. So you'll want to be able to manage, if you're an ISO 27001 environment, those changes in a way that means that you don't have a breakdown of your existing control set, and you can segue neatly as the compliance environment is updated to the new control set. So that's the kind of background in terms of cybersecurity and in terms of compliance. As I said, the issues for you are how do you go about managing that in a way that enables you to stay right on top of what's going on, to be cost effective, and to enable your compliance and cybersecurity staff to really be on top of what they're doing. And Tom's going to talk you through the kind of challenges that our current user base share with us around how to do those challenging jobs. Tom.
Super. Thanks very much, Alan. So I'm Tom, Business Development Manager, as Alan introduced me earlier. So I wanted to start by talking and setting the scene about the nature of the compliance projects themselves, as they are incredibly specific, directly relating to quite exacting controls laid out by a network of 167 international standards bodies. So compliance is a journey, it's not a destination. It takes time and effort to work out and define clear, repeatable processes to manage your assets and to understand the risks facing your organization, and to put into place controls and policies to manage them. So not only this, but all of that information needs to be ready for audits, both internal and external, and continually reviewed and updated to reflect changes within your own businesses, to take into effect external influences and legislative changes. And this journey needs to be robust and cost effective. I wanted to take a look at our customer and prospect base, as we see quite a wide variety of businesses, from small to medium businesses to enterprise and public agencies, across a full spectrum of industry verticals such as critical infrastructure like energy, transportation, manufacturing and healthcare, to the likes of retail and hospitality. We work with some household names like the Open Universities, all the way down to tech startups that are looking to obtain certification. So some of our customers, they'll conduct the majority of the project work themselves, while others will bring in consultants. Some will have a team of people, whereas others perhaps may just have one individual with project ownership. Of these customers, they'll all start using CyberComply either at the start of their journey or when they've got established projects and they just need a better way to manage their data privacy, data security and compliance. So I wanted to cover what those challenges are, because we see a few recurring themes that come up time and time again with our new customers. So firstly, we see those when they're just starting their compliance projects, and often we'll see projects that have been started for commercial reasons. It could be a case where they're bidding for a new customer where certification is perhaps a prerequisite, or they at least need to have the ability to show they've started that journey. Or they may have a long-standing customer who've decided to enforce compliance throughout their entire supply chain. And these projects can sometimes be additionally challenging, as the timeframes tend to be quite tight. In others, we see where it's an individual or a small team within a business that's been given the project of obtaining certification to standards like ISO 27001, but perhaps management aren't yet fully invested in the project or understand too much about the processes involved or the progress that's been made, which leads me nicely onto viewership, which is where an organization wants to start but doesn't know where they can find information easily, like who's responsible for what steps to take, or indeed demonstrating not only the work that's been done, but what's actually left to do as well. Then we will look at organizations who've come to us when they've already got established compliance projects, but perhaps their internal processes and their documents are disorganized and hard to find. It's not surprising, as documents can now be stored across a variety of different platforms. It could be on SharePoint, OneDrive, or worst of all, it could be on a user's individual desktop, or a mixture of all of them, really. We also see organizations repurposing unfit technology platforms. And what I mean by this is when they're taking a technology that's designed for another business function. So we've seen people using HR software, CRM platforms, access databases, and that like. The problem with these, of course, is that they haven't been designed to support the specific types of projects that we're looking at here. As I said, they're specific and they're precise. More challenging again, perhaps, I think Alan alluded to, is organizations using spreadsheets. This information can quickly become buried, it can become outdated, and the processes can be overly complex. And again, it's enhanced risk when one person has perhaps been curating a self-developed document where any staff replacement may struggle to understand or use this. The situations that I've mentioned so far, they can make audits quite time-consuming and difficult. It can take an extraordinary amount of time and effort to pull all of this information together, with teams having to update reports, checking asset inventories and registers, or checking that their risk assessments are up to date and current. Lastly, one thing I wanted to touch on as well is organisations going through mergers and acquisitions. The last few years have been quite dynamic for organisations and industries, and it's particularly relevant to larger organisations. They might be taking over businesses, business units, acquiring their assets. They could be merging teams. They could be then find that they struggle to integrate or decide which business process works best, and finding ways to get those compliance teams to collaborate easily together. So when we've looked at these challenges, we need to ask the question of how can we help you overcome those challenges? Well, we built CyberComply not just to give your customer a return on investment, but to put our customers in the driving seat for their compliance and information security journey. The platform's been built based on our own experience in overcoming the type of challenges that I've mentioned here, both internally and externally as consultants in the delivery of compliance projects for our customers and for our partners. And when we talk about addressing the challenges laid out in the previous slides, I think we can broadly summarize our key goals that we provide in these, which is visibility, control, repeatability, and ease of use. So CyberComply isn't just a platform for pulling together a central repository of policy, documents, and controls. It's not just about conducting robust and repeatable risk assessments or managing data privacy, but it's actually about providing your compliance teams or project owners with a cross-silo toolset, a toolset that will allow them to work together in confidence and achieve and demonstrate compliance. It's designed to enable companies to leverage everybody's contribution to the fullest extent. When I'm talking about cross-silo, what I mean is the bringing together of different functions like data security and data privacy. As both of these teams or functions, if they're conducting themselves in our platform, they can utilize the same assets and data flows so they can fully understand what data they're capturing, the ways and means in which that data is being processed, and ensure they're controlling it responsibly and legally. CyberComply platform has been purpose-built by technical writers, by experienced consultants and legislative experts, but it's not stopped there. It's continuously updated and reviewed to ensure that our customers are working with the latest information. And as Alan mentioned, we know the next 6 to 12 months we'll see a number of changes to UK legislation, to GDPR, and the update, of course, from ISO 27001 from 2013 to 2022, as Alan mentioned. We expect these changes to be relatively minor, but these changes will be updated in the platform, which Gary will touch on when he takes us through that shortly. So we've got a team of subject matter experts. They're constantly keeping up to date with legal and regulatory changes. They're ensuring our platform is being kept up to date, so you can have confidence and peace of mind in our expertise, which we think is surely a better way than having a team spend their time digging through antiquated Excel spreadsheets or searching for documents and pulling reports together. We think that return on investment can be found in that from time saving alone. So touching back on these challenges, when we look at that we're helping you overcome, we're looking at visibility. So when I spoke of putting our customers in the driving seat, we wanted to make sure that relevant users can be presented with exactly the information that they need to manage projects, to make informed decisions. The views and dashboards and reports, they can be quickly and easily configured to provide users with just the information that they need to get their jobs done without getting bogged down in information that's just not relevant for them. And with that visibility, it provides a clear roadmap of what's outstanding, what's implemented, what's not implemented, what's in progress, and what's next. And from visibility, of course, comes control. So by using this, we can link tasks to different functions within the platform, can delegate duties to the team, or team members or consultants can assign approval to relevant stakeholders on work that's been conducted. And our customers and our partners, they may use the tool as a platform in meetings, so they can show up dashboards, they can work through strategically together on what needs to be done. And particularly when we look at things that are repetitive jobs like risk assessments, DPIAs, DSARs, they're all managed centrally in a clear and robust format that are easy to follow. So they produce data that's in the same format each time and present it in a way that's easy to digest. I mean, the feedback that we've had on our VS risk module, for example, suggests that organizations are speeding up their process of risk assessments by about 80% because of this. And of course, when we talk about ease of use and we talk about the future proofing, we don't just mean external changes, we also think of the internal ones that you'll face too. So staff turnover is a real risk in projects, particularly established ones where processes have been developed by one person who may think or organize themselves, or their data in quite a specific way that could be unintelligible to a new starter, could be difficult to get to grips with and manage. So CyberComply has been built with that staff onboarding in mind. We've got setups to make a gamified getting started guides, contextual help menus, and ongoing customer support. And as a SaaS provider, it's very important for us to make sure our user adoption is as quick and as easy as possible. We take pride in the support that we offer there, which Gary, as our customer success manager, will come on to now.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tom. So yes, as both Tom and Alan have introduced me, I'm Gary Baxter, the Customer Success Manager. My role here is to basically ensure that once a decision has been made to, and rightfully so, the right decision to take on CyberComply for an organisation, it's my role to make sure that you and your team are both confident, comfortable, you've got a deep understanding of how the system works, but we don't just leave you guys there, as we take you on the journey with us as well. So we would be on hand if you need a quick support on how do I run this report, my manager's asked me to do such and such, and so on. So what we're going to go through very quickly is just a couple of slides, and we'll expand on them to give it a little bit more depth, as Tom and Alan have done previously. So one of the biggest struggles that organizations might have is, imagine looking at your recruitment drive for a project that you're trying to undertake. Now that could involve, yes, we need to have somebody that is fully understanding of what compliance actually is, but there's also possibly going to need to be something on their CV that means they can build these amazing spreadsheets, these amazing great big reports, etc., which takes time to find those sorts of people. And sometimes you might need to duplicate that effort and have 2 or 3 people in that recruitment drive, not just one person for that specific role. Now, where CyberComply comes in is we have dedicated developers that they're not just developers for software in general. They understand this type of workflow. They understand what information security is. In fact, our developers, our training teams, our sales teams all go through the same training courses to do with 27001. We go through both foundation and practitioner for legal and regulatory areas. So we're not just here to tell you how to run a report or build a platform that we think is correct. We know it's correct based on our internal expertise. As it's already been spoken about previously, we do have 20 years of group experience in the industry, which has allowed us over that period to build up a team of world-class consultants. Now, it's all good and well us just writing that down on a piece of paper, but what that actually means in the real world is that 20 years of experience and those world-class consultants, these aren't people that just sit in offices and kind of think, oh, this might be a risk that could apply to a business. They're on the ground, they're in these buildings with these companies, they're seeing in real life what these threats are, what's upcoming, etc. They're embedded in this. It's kind of their livelihood, it is their life effectively, and we pull on those resources to ensure that the content that you're going to have access to within CyberComply is regularly updated. We provide things like extensive risk libraries, so if you're looking at an asset and go, well, I think I've covered everything, let me use CyberComply, it will probably give me some hints on what other threats and vulnerabilities are likely to come up on that type of thing. Moving further down, we then have a dedicated technical writing team. Now, all of us could essentially do a copy and paste of the regulation, pop it in a spreadsheet and color code it as, yes, it's compliant, etc. It's all good and well, but again, you're going back onto that fail point of if that individual leaves or they're off on extended leave, whether it's maternity, COVID, whatever the case might be, you're kind of up the creek without a paddle unless you've got that other expertise in-house that can do it. With our technical writing team, even if you have to do that handover at very short notice, our team will ensure that not only is the content accurate, but that it's easily digested by the reader. So it's kind of clearing the way a little bit. You're not diving into swathes of information. It's just hitting you with the cold hard facts of what you need to be doing, whether it's for implementation of controls or compliance with certain regulations. Now, how we handle all this is through automatic updates. CyberComply is not something that we put into an organization which basically just gives us a continual revenue stream of the fact of every time we release something, we ask more of you. It's just something that we make available to every user. If there's a change, as Alan and Tom have already alluded to 27001, to the UK GDPR, these are pushed directly straight into the system. Now, these notifications are made to you via once you're logged in, so you're made straight away aware of, yep, okay, this has been changed. We also communicate very easily through email directions as well, so that we'll give you detailed release notes. And the reason why our release notes are very important in this type of thing is that, yes, there could have been a regulatory change, but that regulatory change might mean that a process for a DPIA has been modified, or maybe a process map that, let's say in 2020 was absolutely fine, the UK become a third country, and that's then going to affect your data flows that you've already been working on and creating. So those release notes will also tell you that because of these changes, these other things will also need to be updated. We've made sure the process is handled for you, and it will simply be log in and we'll tell you where to start your work straight away. So there's no kind of fumbling your way through the weeds to figure out, brilliant, so it's all changed, now where do we go from here? Now, us doing all that for you is absolutely fine, but what we ask and what we are very, very big advocates for is trying to get as much feedback from our customers. Yes, we have a great internal team that can guide us on what content we need to provide to you, what information is going to help you. Obviously, we've got developers that work on the platform around the clock. With us being global, we can do that during the middle of the night when most of us are asleep. It allows us to be quite dynamic in that particular respect, but we also heavily rely on our customer feedback. The system itself has community areas where individual users, from regardless of any sort of subscription level, any sort of organization size, or even access level to their own instance, they can leave notes to say, we would quite like a report to look like this, or are you doing anything around this area? And because it's an open forum, other users within CyberComply can upvote those systems, and our developers, not just us that are kind of front of house like Tom, myself, and some other key members of the team, the developers have direct access to that as well. So they can see, we can see that this thing is being upvoted 20, 30, 40 times. They can then update the status of, okay, yeah, we're going to put that into the roadmap, and you've got that instant satisfaction of, I've made a suggestion and it's already being worked on. So we're very open to that type of thing here at Vigilant Software, and specifically with our flagship product, CyberComply. So moving on to the next slide, we then look at onboarding. So brilliant, you've made the decision, yeah, this makes a lot more sense for us to go down this route. We're not going to go with antiquated ways of spreadsheets, etc. We're going to go with this. Now, I'll be openly honest with you, I've bought software before that can sometimes seem quite overwhelming, quite daunting. You kind of sit there going, okay, well, I've got it now, what do I do? Another thing that Tom mentioned earlier is we do pride ourselves on both our onboarding and our ongoing training and support services that we provide. I'm not going to read the right-hand side. I've just put a couple of snippets in there of recent reviews that we've had from our customer base. If you can't read it because it's quite small, take my word for it, they're quite glowing. And you can see that they're mainly 5-star reviews as well. Now, let's say you've gone down the route, you've decided, yep, CyberComply is the right decision for myself. What happens next is a member of the team, it's likely to be myself or another member of the support panel, they will contact you directly to say, right, let's get you guys on board, let's get you up to speed, let's understand who needs to have access, and we can start setting up training. Now, training is a fully integrated part of this, because it ensures that when we hand it over to you guys, we know where you are when we come back to us for support. So the training is included, it's a full handhold experience, and we can either do that through a screen share on like a demonstration account that we host, or because of permissions that we can be allowed by our users, we can sometimes actually log into their accounts with their permission and actually get the account set up as part of that training process as well. We've also identified over the past couple of years in us doing this, and obviously in-house we have these struggles as well, as much as any other business, is dealing with new users that might have to use a platform. So going back to, if there's a change in job title, change in job role, you've created a new role and they're going to be more involved in this project, we also offer new user training at no additional cost. So you never have that worry of, before that person goes on holiday, they've got to spend a week of that transition period of teaching something new. You basically go, look, speak to Gary, speak to Tom, speak to whoever it is, they'll get you up to speed. So it takes off that heavy lifting from internal resource from your side. Now, all of the CyberComply modules themselves have a live chat system baked into it. I've just put in there the recent score matrix that we've got from it, and it's at 98% score rating for our support. And the support is there for general use of the system, so navigation, how would I run this type of report, I'm trying to see this information in this type of format, how do we do that? We can either fire over some very quick video tutorials, we have some very in-depth but easily understandable user guides, or we can actually set up very quick screen shares and run you through exactly how you can do it and pass and leave it back over to yourselves. Because we also ensure that all of our staff are trained to at least some form of foundation level of understanding what InfoSec is, what compliance actually looks like, we do also understand that the reason why you might want to do it this way is because it will help you with maybe building out your statement of applicability, or the reason why we would suggest you do X, Y, and Z is because it will make your risk treatment plan a lot more sensible, a lot more logical to both internal and external, and so on and so forth. The ongoing communications from our platform and content updates is something I spoke about just a moment ago, and that is around how we communicate outwardly from ourselves to our user base. We do it through a number of methods. Obviously, myself in my role, I basically become your friend. As soon as you've joined us, I'm your go-to guy. If you need anything at all, talk about the weather on Tuesday. Yes, it was 40 degrees, it was boiling hot. Or if you actually want to have some more training, some onboarding, any sort of assistance, that's how we can communicate directly. We also do a lot of automated emails from our system. So yes, we offer that internal that initial training, that initial onboarding, but we'll also have some dynamic emails sent out to individual users, so that if, for example, a user has done X, Y, and Z in CyberComply, they will receive a tailored email to themselves periodically to say, we can see you've done this. Have you tried now doing this? So there's always that hand-on, that help by your side to kind of help you understand, okay, what's my next evolutionary step inside of CyberComply? The final stages that I want to cover off is what's on the horizon for CyberComply. We're not a system that we've built up and we go, yep, happy with that, let's move on to something completely different now and leave it as it stands. It's as good as it gets. Of course it is, and as Alan was talking about earlier, what Tom's already been speaking about is the landscape for cyber threat. Anything in that sort of field is continuously evolving. So what we are doing inside of CyberComply is we currently have our technical writing team understanding what the UK GDPR changes are going to be, and we will ensure that the moment that that box has been ticked to say yes, they've gone live, it will be made available immediately inside the system. Typically 1 minute past midnight, we've got a developer that's ready to push that live. We also have the ISO 27001 controls being updated, and the way that we handle it is not simply by just pushing that content in there. We will actually map it back to its predecessor. So if you are already a 27001 2013 certified business, we will map, okay, if you're looking at 7.2.2 within that standard, you could look at related controls and it will give you an extensive list of not just 27001 2022, but SOC 2, etc. And it just aids in that kind of migration, that transition from new to old. That's what you'll really find the benefit within the compliance manager specifically, and CyberComply will be able to assist you with. The NIS2 directive, that's already being worked on, and we can also share with people on the call today a new module that we have coming live over the next couple of weeks, which is the Incident Manager. And essentially it's going to be an area where you can record and track cyber instances as they happen. So it's going to try and alleviate some of those concerns that Alan was mentioned earlier, that basically people either they're too scared to report it or anything like that, or they don't really have processes in place to understand, brilliant, we've had some form of incident, now what do we actually do with it? By using systems like ours, they can get on top of it straight away, they can get ahead of the game. If it involves a personal data breach, it can keep them within that 72-hour period. If they've had other sorts of instances, like a malware attack, for example, this will ensure that not only, let's say, head of IT is aware that one of their servers has been attacked, for example, but then they can start farming out those individual points to maybe some of the IT help desk, to some of the leadership teams across the organization, so they're at least aware that, especially for someone like, let's say, the head of customer services, that they're aware that they could start receiving an influx of customer support tickets because something's happened, but they're ahead of the game. They can already let their users aware of, we know it's happened, we're tracking it appropriately, it will be resolved, and so on and so forth. So it's just trying to keep that whole circle of truth and circle of life and a single point of truth. So what that's going to conclude the session today on is ultimately what all three of us have spoken about today, and that's cyber defense in-depth strategy. Now, the first line is always going to be largely detective. It's kind of on an organization to at least have a baseline understanding of, okay, let's understand what sort of vulnerabilities we do have. And you can do that through things like vulnerability scanning, part of things like Cyber Essentials, and so on and so forth. Authentication policies, phishing staff awareness, the typical things that if you start going into these sorts of thought processes, these projects, they would be your first go-tos. Now, where CyberComply slots into this particular chart is second line, third line, and fourth line. Largely preventative. The nature of CyberComply is that you're already aware of what's changing, what's already updating, etc., and you've got it all in one place. So you can already be relatively preventative on notions that might happen or might occur in the future. Largely preventative, but not mature. So you're going to start looking at embedding risk-based security controls. So again, we've got risk managers, we've got all those control frameworks available to you. We even plug into things like document kits. So even if you don't understand or have the time to learn how to build a correct policy for InfoSec, we can tie into that, and it makes the whole journey a lot more seamless from that perspective as well. And then lastly, the area that we would come into is going to be the corrective nature. So the supply chain management, the business continuity management, and IT disaster recovery. While CyberComply doesn't do that directly, it feeds into those meetings that those guys in the C-suite, the upper management, are going to be having around, if this happens, what do we do about it? And there'll be somebody with CyberComply, with the dashboards, able to very clearly demonstrate, this is what we're already aware of, this is what we're going to be working on, so this is going to feed into your decisions from this point onwards. And then the fifth line of recovery, we're not an insurance brokerage, so to speak, so we can't sell you that side of things, but that would be your absolute last point if all the other 4 points fail. So I think that does bring us on to the last couple of slides. How do you get in touch with us? So the session today is obviously hopefully brought to light some of the concerns in the world, some of the things you might need to be considering when you're looking at the type of projects moving forward. Tom has obviously gone through the pain points organizations have, how CyberComply might be able to overcome them, and obviously what I've just been through today is just clearing up those 2 points and how CyberComply can help you going on into the future as well. Now, if you'd like to know more about how CyberComply works, if you want to know more of the technical intricacies of it, or simply just have a chat with us, you can either contact us through IT governance. They've got staff on hand that would be able to give you more guidance on this, and obviously Vigilant Software, us guys here. We're obviously happy to set up demonstrations to your team members if you want to have a better overview. And if that even sounds like a little bit too much hard work, we also offer free trials. It's no obligation. Go straight onto the Vigilant website, Vigilant Software website, or onto the IT governance website, plug in a couple of details, and you'll have full access for the next 30 days. So that brings us to the very end. So if anybody has any questions, I did see a couple go into the chat box. Unfortunately, I can't do 2 things at once, so I couldn't read those at the same time. So I think we've got the last 17 minutes to go through these.
Super. So I'll read one out, and if you want, I've got them up here. So currently using spreadsheets to manage risk assessments, how easy is it to transition? Well, we think very easy. So we put together wizards within the platform which guide you through the process. We like to think it's quite a straightforward process. And again, if you want to see that in action, reach out to us and we'll show you how that works. Or as Gary said, take out the trial. But it's not complicated. If you're technically savvy enough to use an Excel document, you'll certainly be able to get to grips with our wizards. Gary, I'll ask one of you. How easy is it to change users inside the platform? So if someone leaves?
Yeah, of course. So as with other software platforms, for example, if you buy a license, it's directly attached to that individual user, which that's fine if that user's never ever going to leave and you're quite happy with that person to own it. With our licenses, they're quite dynamic. So if there is a change in job role, whether somebody's been promoted to a higher position, so they need to have more ownership and viewership inside the platform, the organization admin in a matter of seconds can log in, upgrade or demote that particular user, and then they've got instant access. If, for example, they're bringing someone completely new into the system, it's a matter of following those same steps, plug in their email address, they receive an email notification, and they're logged in, up and running in the matter of seconds as well. So it's a very straightforward process.
Super. Does Vigilant have certifications themselves? What security protocols do you have in place? Well, we've got quite a number of standards across the group, things like 27001, 9001, we're Cyber Essentials Plus. Gary, did you want to go on to some of the specifics of the platform, things like where it's hosted, that type of thing?
Yeah, of course. So just touching on what Alan was saying, was what Tom was saying. We do very much practice what we preach. So yes, we do ensure that we are compliant and we are implementing certain standards to ensure that your data, because let's be honest, with the information you guys are putting in is your vulnerabilities as a business, potentially if you're looking at risk management. Now, how we safeguard all of that is we do ensure that all of our software developers are OWASP trained, so there's a level of security in there. We personally use Microsoft Azure as our hosting platform, and it's located in Western Europe. So there's that kind of, if you're within the EU or in the UK, there's no concern of sending data outside of that kind of jurisdictions. There's no concerns around that. And obviously using I suppose, a well embedded and a very trusted partner such as Microsoft, they also bring their own security controls, obviously their SOC 2 compliant, etc. And there's a plethora of other security standards that we both either do by standard default and practice, and some of which are we're obviously certified with as well. But we do we can pop into the chat for this session, have a dedicated security page which goes into that in a little bit more detail if that's up your street, and you may need it for supplier questionnaires further down the line as well.
Super. Will the slides be shared? Yes, absolutely. They'll be sent out to everybody who's been here today. And are there any new modules planned for the future? Timely question. And the landscape of cybersecurity is expected to change over the coming months and years. So Gary, I'll let you jump onto that one. It's very timely given the new module that we actually got a sneak peek of recently.
Yes, so it was a sneak peek even for some of us internal bots. We got to see some pretty screens. We got to see roughly what it's going to look like and its function. So yes, we have the Incident Manager that is due for release over the next couple of months. We don't have a specific deadline, so don't base entire projects on that one module coming live, but it is definitely coming in the next couple of months. And then after that, as we've mentioned a couple of times, CyberComply is not a standstill product. It will continuously evolve. It will start to embed with more external systems. So if you are looking at maybe integrating things like your policies, your staff awareness, things like that, these are all things that we are looking to do in the future. So we can't go into too much detail. Obviously, that'll be sharing our trade secrets, and we want to keep some of them to ourselves. But yes, it is exciting times over the next couple of months and the next quarters for Vigilant Software and CyberComply.
Super. I can't see any others. So in that case, if there are no other questions, we'll end the session there.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you all for your time. Thank you, Alan, for your piece at the beginning. And yes, we look forward to hearing from you in the near future. Have some interesting conversations on how we can embed and help you with your upcoming projects. So thank you.
Super. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers, everybody. Thank you.